Good morning and welcome to my hobby table again for yet another episode of Engine Talk. Today's video is not actually going to be showing or displaying any engines. I'm going to be talking about some tools and tools that we, all of us might need to use at some point when we're trying to service engines. Specifically OS Surpass style engines, and I say style because you've got the Magnum and ASP that are all styled after that, and even some Enya engines. So before I get into these tools that I've got in here, and as usual, there's a story that goes along with these things. There's real-time stories. These aren't just things I'm making up out of the blue. These videos come about because of stories and actual things that happen to me. But before I get into that, I just want to say that this video and a lot of the things I'm able to do now with servicing these engines would not be possible without the generosity and kindness of several people. Bill being one of them, who has provided me with some tools we'll talk about here. The cam bearing removal tool. My buddy Harvey, who has provided me with a Christmas gift of a bench grinder and now another part for an engine that I need. Harvey has been instrumental in giving me many parts that I need to service engines, and I'm very grateful to you, Harvey, and Bill. Bill has just been continuously assisting me with this task of cam bearing removal. So let's get right into it. So when you're servicing these engines, and it's for the last 15 years that I've been doing servicing of engines, these have always been the sticking points and things that always bring up a little bit of stress when I'm trying to service engines. And when it comes to an OS Surpass style engine or this style of engine, you've got two areas that cause the greatest amount of stress when you're trying to disassemble an engine and replace bearings for someone. And that is these cam cover bearing, or the bearings that are in the camshaft, extracting them, and then of course removal of the piston pin from the piston, because in many instances, not all, but many instances of some OS engines and these Magnum ASP engines, you have to pull that piston pin out and have the piston come off the connecting rod before you can get the connecting rod off the crankshaft, and before you can't replace bearings if you can't get the crankshaft out of the engine. So those are the two primary areas that were always like, when I would be disassembling these engines, I'm like, well, what's the condition of this engine? Oh my goodness, am I going to have issues with that? Well, an unfortunate incident just happened over the last week where I did have a real issue with a piston pin, and I'm going to start with that. So this is the piston pin of an OS FS70 Surpass engine I was working on. Now, this engine, it was amazing because it was a very low time engine. Everything was in very good shape, except for the fact that I just could not get this piston pin out. I spent several hours heating and cooling and ultrasonic and doing all this and that. And usually what a lot of people will do is the first thing you got to do is you got to pull that little Teflon disc out, and so you can access the pin itself. And this kind of is a little slight digression. OS, why in the hell didn't you thread these piston pins so that you could make it easier? But anyway, so Bill had given me a little rat tail file, and for the life of me, I was not able to get this thing to work at all. And which is weird because it's going in there fine now. You know what? I couldn't get this thing to go in deep enough to grab. And so what was happening here, and I think I understand now why, there are two end caps that go like this. They're called piston retainers. There's one that goes on either side to, keep the piston pin from coming out and scoring the sleeve. I believe there was another one in here, and that's exactly why I had that issue, was that this is the one that I extracted from the engine, and then there was another one on the other side. And when I was trying to insert a tool to get in there, it was pushing that one out. And it's like, well, crap, so I'm pushing that out, and I think I was starting to move. I don't know if I was actually moving the piston pin back that way, but it's what it seemed like. But either way, this small rat tail file that Bill had given me, I couldn't get this thing in there, so I started trying to use like a screw and all kinds of other things. Well, what ended up happening was I found like a 632 tap And I'm thinking, that's going to be great. It's fluted and it has threads and this is a joyful thing. So I start putting that in there, heating it, and I'm hoping that if I can just get this piston pin to rotate in the piston boss, you're golden. If you can get it to rotate, it'll come out, period. And that's kind of what I said many years ago when I thought I had another idea on how to get these out, was if the engine is in a condition that can be run, even if the bearings are bad, run the engine. Run it up to speed. And then disassemble it immediately. Because the action of running this engine will free up this. At least it did in several instances where I did it. So anyway, what happens is, I believe, is the tolerances on the piston and the boss and the pin are so tight that it doesn't take hardly anything at all to cause that just to freeze. And to me, it seemed like it was galling, because this piston pin, even when I got it out, it looked beautiful. But it was like, it wasn't, I had used LAs and ultrasonics, so there was no carbon or castor oil residue on here left. It was just some kind of galling or something, and it wouldn't move. I got it free now. But what ended up happening is I stuck that 632 tap in there, and I'm sitting there hoping, and I'm just turning it very slowly, hoping, and trying to watch, am I actually rotating the piston, or is the tap turning in the piston? I couldn't tell. And then all of a sudden, the worst case scenario happens, and the tap snapped off and broke. And it broke flush. So it wasn't even protruding out of the case at all. Was not protruding out, the tap that broke was not protruding out of the case at all. And I'm like, holy shit, this really, really sucks. So the bottom line is I end up having to destructively remove the connecting rod, which was not a pleasant thing. And then I'm thinking, well, I just ate however much the cost of a new connecting rod is. And that's where Harvey comes in and saves my bacon. He's got a whole ton of parts, and he's sending me a new connecting rod so I can put in this engine. So that's the story, is that was a stressful ordeal. And so I had talked to Bill about another issue that we're going to get to here soon. And I told him, I said, well, this file you sent me just isn't the right size for this piston pin. Well, it is. But I'm doing this, and it's like, it is only to a point. Because if that other retainer is still in there. So the other thing I was doing was, I saw that I was pushing that retainer out. So I'd stuck a popsicle stick down between the sleeve and the piston to keep that retainer, because I was thinking that if I'm pushing a retainer out, maybe the pin is going that way too, and I don't want it to go that way, I want it to go this way. So I stuck a popsicle stick down there, which was just enough room to go between the ring and the outer case to hold that in place. And I think by me doing that, that was not allowing this to get in there deep enough to grab, because Bill's telling me, he's like, hey, look, I've used these files for years and they always work. And I'm like, well, the one you sent me doesn't seem to work. And I think that was why, now that I'm looking at this, is that the taper wasn't enough, and I had been pushing that thing out, and then I was holding it this way with a popsicle stick, so it wasn't allowing it to get in there. So anyway, Bill had sent me a different file. So now, thank you very much, Bill, for sending me this file. This is incredible, because now I'm hoping that, and they have these, squares on them so you can get on them with a wrench and hopefully turn it, or maybe shouldn't need to, but this was just an unbelievable pin. I mean, the internal condition of the engine was very, very nice. I hardly had to clean it at all. I mean, I couldn't understand why that pin was so tight, but it was. So along the same lines as the rat tail files and trying to extract those things, I had been trying to use these wood screws and all kinds of crap, and it just was frustrating and not working. So I'm thinking, and Bill had suggested, well, why don't you just get an easy out and try an easy out. Well, so I didn't have easy outs, and I've never seen an easy out that was small enough to go inside piston pin holes. Never. I'd never seen them that small. Until I started doing some searching, and of course this is from Amazon, and who knows what the level of quality is of it. But it's an easy out set, which comes with the drills to drill, whatever. I didn't care about that. These were not part of what I cared about. The only part that I really cared about was these guys right here. Number 1 and number 2. And we don't mean number 2 in that vein. But number 1, I was looking at the specs on it, and it said like these are like 1 to 3 millimeter or whatever. And this does fit in there. Really nice. So now I've got a backup plan. In addition to these files, and maybe changing my techniques a little bit, I got a backup plan. Now, is the backup plan, these easy outs, is that any better? I don't know. I would be very hesitant to do anything too harsh with this, because the last thing I'd want to do is break off one of these things in there and have to destructively remove a connecting rod again. But I mean, and I guess with enough heat, Harvey also turned me on to some gloves that he has from Harbor Freight. They're welder's gloves. I haven't actually got out there and purchased them yet, but he says that they're even a lot better than the UV glove that I use. And I think that thing only protects you up to maybe 375, 400 degrees. I don't know. All I know is I was heating this engine up so hot and holding it like this, holding it, heating it, and then when I have to go and hold it to do this, it was so hot that I was actually feeling the heat and getting burned through the UV glove. And Harvey's like, well, get these gloves. So I'm going to go to Harbor Freight today and pick those gloves up. They're like $6.99. And it's like, well, hell, if I can sit there and hold something extremely hot with those, then that's what I'm going to do. So I'm upgrading some tools here, basically to assist in engine servicing, and hope this information is useful to you too. So I found easy outs that are tapered enough, small enough in diameter that it will at least fit in this. Now, this small rat tail file should fit in a much the piston pin holes of smaller engines, and this actually would probably go into a pretty small piston pin hole also. So that is what this is all about. Now, will I ever use these things? Well, who can ever use a drill bit? I mean, I kind of like the drill bits that have these little hex things on them because they make them easier to. And this tool set actually came with like a quick release chuck. So, I mean, that's cool. I mean, so there are things about this toolkit that are nice. Do I ever have the need to actually extract screws? Not very often. But I mean, now I've got the capability to do it. And of course, these are left-hand screws, left-hand twist screws, specifically designed for doing that. So I mean, I wouldn't be drilling holes with them. But so this looks like a fairly decent little set. I think it was like $27, so it wasn't super expensive, but hopefully it'll pay for itself, you know, in just relieving stress in addition to these rat tail files. Now the last tool I'm going to talk about is, I was just working on a Magnum engine, not the one on my table here, another customer's engine. And I ran into an issue trying to extract the bearings. Let me just go ahead and zoom in here more. Trying to extract the bearings using Bill's tool. I actually had an issue, and this is a different tool. He just so gracious and so graciously just provided to me. And I don't have the original one anymore because I sent it back to him. Bill said it's under warranty and he was going to rework it or do something to it. But I can put some little clips here from my video that I'm making for the Magnum video, or I'll just put a screenshot up there that shows that the tip of the other tool was much bigger. It wasn't flat and flared like this. It was kind of like round and bulbous. Well, I had come into two situations, and one of them was with this 70 Surpass engine, and the other was with the Magnum engine, which was unusual because you'd like to think, and Bill designed that tool to fit, it has to go all the way through the race. So this tool has to go all the way through. If you could do that, you could. It has to go all the way through to the outer edge of the race. What was happening on this engine, I managed to get this one out. I don't know how, but somehow I did. But the Magnum engine, that bearing is still in there because I haven't finished that video yet. I was only able to get that bulbous part on the original tool in the race. There just wasn't enough gap between. It's almost like you can push this in far enough so it'll work, and then you can push it in just a little bit further. Because that's what I was finding with this. Once I got this bearing out, I was like, wait a minute, why was it so they've got it designed here so that I believe this little area here is the only area that should be open, and the bearing itself should come right to there. Well, if that's the case, look how small that is. So what I'm thinking is that in many instances, and maybe when Bill had been using his tool, the bearing wasn't pushed all the way in. It was in, but there may be degrees of inness. See how there could be various degrees of inness there? So what I was doing with this engine was, once I got that bearing out, and this is the one from the Magnum from the cam cover, I pushed it in again, and I would put the cam gear in. And then I put the cam cover on, and if I could, the cam cover wouldn't go flush and fit, I knew the bearing was still out too far, so then I just tap it in just enough so that I could get this thing to fit flush, the cam cover fit flush, screw it in place, and everything is great. But I also determined that I could push it in a little bit more. And that little bit more is the danger zone, where you can't, with Bill's other tool, and we were unable to go all the way through the race and grab it. So this one is flared in such a way, and this tool came with a whole different push rod too, because on these push rods, Bill will have either this thing, which looks like it's swaged on there or something, I'm not sure, or the other tool had a nice brass knurled knob, but it has to be set at a certain depth because you want this tool, this rod, to go in only so far. You want it to go in all the way and bottom out, and that should equate to being right at the flush edge here. Now what I had found, and so that's perfect there, so I do that, and now you can't pull that bearing off, and this will work. And Bill's kind of cautioned me about using this tool very cautiously or sparingly, because of the thinner you make that material, the more fragile it becomes. But what I had found with my other tool that I sent back to Bill was that when I pushed it in, and this is what led me to understand what was going on with that engine, or getting the bearing, is I'd push it in and it would stop. I couldn't get it to go flush. And I'm like, well, that's not a good thing, because I'd take this whole thing out, take it off like this, and I'd shove it in there, flush, and I was like, well, it's flush here, everything is good, it should be fine. So that told me that if it was going in and it wasn't flush here, wasn't contacting that upper nut, that it wasn't actually going in there and locking. And that other tool, so I had been kind of trying to tap on it lightly, trying to get it to go all the way in, and it just wasn't working. But somehow I was able to get it tight enough on this OS 70 Surpass engine that I was able to get that bearing out. The Magnum, no, I've tried numerous times, I'm done trying. So I sent an email to Bill saying, hey, I've got this issue, have you ever seen this? And he didn't really make it sound like he'd ever seen it, but he had made a lip like this, so maybe he did. But this rod is even a little bit thicker now because of the dimensional tolerances of this portion here now too. Because I did keep some of his, oh, I'm sitting here, I could have been showing you this. I did keep part of this. That's the push rod part I kept, but these two push rods are different diameters because of the fact that I guess because there's obviously this is a bigger diameter there. I'm not sure. But so this is what I was talking about. I know this doesn't go with this tool, but I was pushing this thing in and it was only going this far, but this one has got a set screw so it can be easily adjusted. This one does not appear to have any kind of mechanism to easily adjust that, which is probably better. I don't know that I ever moved that thing. I don't think I could have moved it. I don't think when I was tapping that I accidentally hit this thing and moved it, because it would have moved that way, not this way, because it would appear that it appeared to me that it had moved out this way, and it's like, well, I guess if I was tapping on this, but see, I never had that contact. It was never contacting anything, and if it was always like here, and if I was tapping on it, that would have not moved. So I don't understand what dynamic changed. But I did have to readjust this tool with the tool I sent back to Bill to set it so that it was flush. So I don't understand how that moved, but that was also one of those indicators that said, hey, something isn't right here. So anyway, I still have to finish that bearing removal removal video for the Magnum and then do the reinstallation. This is the bearing that came out of the Magnum one, the cam cover. So it's also, I find it interesting that at least with Magnum and maybe ASP, these lesser quality engines, these are not fully shielded, but yet the bearings that come out of OS engines and that come in the Boca kit are fully shielded, and that's how I put them in there because I think that's important. That aids to the longevity for sure of these bearings. These bearings are so much more susceptible to feeling grungy. I won't say they ever go bad, but feeling grungy and getting crap in there, this will protect that. Now, these are not in areas where you're getting a whole lot of stuff. I mean, sure, oil and stuff gets in there to keep them lubricated, but I don't know how much debris or grime gets in there. This kind of stuff just happens over time. But if it happens over time here, it's happening over time on the outer race and not so much so on the inside. Now, can I prove that? Not entirely, because I do have some used bearings like this, but I tend to try to put them in solvent and the ultrasonic cleaner and clean them up and then put them in bearing soak, the Boca bearing soak, to revitalize them, because honestly, I don't believe those things really ever go bad. They only rotate about 50% of the speed of a main crankshaft bearing. And if they're sealed, they're in pretty good shape. Let's put this on here. See, even this one, it still feels really good. It doesn't look super good. I mean, it's discolored, but I mean, and a lot of times people will think, well, if it's discolored, it's crap. I wouldn't hesitate to put this in one of my engines if I was in a pinch and needed a bearing. I'll just simply, clean this up with solvent and soak it in bearing soak, and that'll help it a lot. But I mean, so I don't understand why some engine companies or manufacturers would go to, using these unshielded bearings for those as opposed to shielded ones. But the OS ones I've removed are always fully shielded, and that's how I put them in, and I will always put them in that way, because in these instances I think that helps a lot. But anyway, long video, but I just wanted to explain some of the real life challenges that I have been facing. I'm sure many people have been facing when they're servicing their own engines when it comes to these type of things. So that's the video for today. Thank you, Harvey. Thank you, Bill, very, very much for all that you have done for me to assist me in this endeavor, because this only gives me more confidence to continue to service other people's engines, because I like to have people in this hobby experiencing the hobby with glow engines, and if I can assist them in doing that and have engines that are in top shape, that's what I'm going to do. So thank you all, and thank you all for watching.